Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11 of Design Lab. That's our little series that encourages viewer participation to help create an interesting and unique design based on a topic. So, the topic for this episode is going to be gun tech, but the topic's really just gun, and you can do any type of gun you want from a simple pistol to a rifle, bazooka, or any kind of crazy sci fi fantasy weapon that you think fits the category. So you're pretty much open to do stuff. But I guess there are some things you should remember, and I probably should have done a simple topic like this for our first kind of industrial design lab. But balance and functionality are going to be key. Since this can be such a simple topic and it's just like something you hold in your hand, you really want to focus on making sure it has a good weight balance, has a good functionality. It just feels like it can actually, be held, be fired, or whatever. Just it needs to feel right. So anyway, as per usual, we're going to be submitting our designs at conceptart.org, which has kind of been down the past week or so. But I assure you it's up now. Hopefully it stays up, and it might still be flagged by Google or whatever for being hacked, but I think they've cleared it all up and it seems to work. And there will be a link to that thread in the description below. So in order to participate, just go into the little description below and you'll be able to find that thread. But anyway, back to the actual topic of gun design and functionality and balance and all that good stuff. I'm just going to mess around here for a little bit and create some designs. But before I get into any interesting design stuff, usually when I'm creating something, the first thing I want to do is draw something realistic that has the same kind of features as the thing I want to create. And that just really helps you get into that mindset of functionality. So obviously you can't always do that for things like mechs and things because there aren't quite realistic counterparts for what you might want to do. But since this topic is going to be guns, I strongly recommend you actually draw some real guns before you start doing your crazy concepts of original ideas. So this is just going to be a quick silhouette of a M4 style rifle. And you can see I started out with like the whole trigger area and the handle. And obviously, it's important to kind of understand how guns work. So I guess I can just quickly go over it. I'm sure most of you understand. But say like the area right there in front of the trigger is going to be the opening where the magazine goes, and the magazine holds your ammo. So that's going to push a bullet up into the chamber area, and then when you squeeze the trigger, it's going to work a mechanism that's going to cause the bullet to fire through the barrel and all that stuff. But it's very important to kind of get these basic things to make sense. You want to think about where your ammo is going to go, what your magical gun is going to fire, how it's going to be held. That's probably the most important thing that's going to make your design look like it actually is a good design, like it makes sense, is just the ability to hold it. So you can see here I'm kind of messing with the handle a little bit. But the handle is one of those important things. If you were to say, just quickly right now, point your finger straight out in front of you, your index finger. If you can get a side view of like how your knuckles look, the rest of your knuckles look while you're doing that, you would notice that they're at that slight angle, which happens to line up perfectly with the angle you see on, well, like real guns and pistols and things. So if that handle was like straight up and down into the gun, that would kind of instantly make it look like a poor design. It would make it look not functional. So that's why functionality becomes such a key thing. It's just, if something doesn't look like you can actually hold it, like it would actually work, like it actually has balance and weight and stuff like that, then suddenly it just the design looks off. It doesn't look good, and I see that in a lot of kind of gun designs and things like that where they try to get too crazy, but suddenly there's no way to hold it properly, or it just doesn't look like you could actually use it. In fact, I had that problem with a lot of my early kind of designs. I think the very first thing I posted on conceptart.org was actually like a crazy sci-fi rifle thing, And they were nice enough to actually kind of explain to me like all this stuff because I was, coming out of DeviantArt, didn't really know what I was doing. But they, explained to me like all this stuff about, how it needs to be functional, and there wasn't enough room for your hand or whatever. Uh, I'm kind of getting behind on my video here. I made this quick little design, like a pistol thing below my other gun, and I just wanted to demonstrate what not to do, or like a mistake that commonly gets made. You can see how I have this magazine of ammo maybe above the gun, and aside from maybe being a distraction and not being able to aim properly, it also has the maybe there's some functionality anyway, but it also has the distinction of having a horrible silhouette. So that's something that might be functional, but it's certainly horrible from a silhouette standpoint. You can see there's tangents that are just going off in kind of every direction, and you really want to try to streamline things if you're going to do kind of industrial design. And that's once again another common problem that people run into is just kind of going overboard with the design and kind of having stuff going off in every direction. It just doesn't feel cohesive. It doesn't have a good balance to it. It just doesn't feel, pleasant to look at from a silhouette standpoint, because things need to have a flow to them. If you were to think of it like music or any other creative endeavor, there needs to be a flow to things. You can't just have it, beep booping off in every direction and expect it to be pleasant to look at or listen to. So this is kind of something in the opposite direction where the silhouette is very, I don't know, it's very blocky. It's very simple. There's just a small opening for your hand. And that's not, a drastically original or interesting design, but at least it feels more functional. And it also feels kind of sci-fi and silly. I think I've seen designs like that used in games and movies and things. But these are all examples of kind of standard guns that, as we know them, there's a place for your basic bullets to be fired out a barrel, and using kind of basic projectiles as we know them. But you can certainly get way more experimental than that. So, for instance, I'm doing a silhouette down here, which might look like I don't know, a space, a space shuttle. I don't know, a spacecraft of some sort. But then when you draw a handle on it and a trigger, then suddenly it becomes familiar and it looks like gun. And you can probably use this trick a lot if you just make weird shapes, then find ways to incorporate like a handle and a trigger that looks balanced. Suddenly anything turns into a gun. And you can see that in a lot of games and sci-fi things where if they didn't have like triggers and handles, they'd probably just look like spaceships. I think Halo's kind of a funny example of that, where the actual spaceships kind of look like rifles without handles, and the rifles look like spaceships with handles. But anyway, there's so many types of kind of scientific experimental guns to research and look into if you wanted inspiration. There's rail guns and coil guns and gauze rifles, which are all pretty similar. They all function under the ideas of using electromagnetism to shoot a projectile at incredible speeds. But if you research those things, it might give you ideas on other ways you can approach creating your weapon or your gun. For instance, railguns often use two rails, hence the name. So maybe you have something with two long rails out in front, like that first silhouette I did. Or, maybe you just go crazy. You really don't have to have something that is functional. You can just make a bunch of little shapes, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't, obey any modern science that we know of, as long as it looks cool and there's some amount of familiarity to it, which usually just comes in with these things. It usually just comes in the handle and the trigger. So you can see I'm just trying to give a crazy example of that with that thing with those three lines coming out, where it's basically just a trigger, a handle, and then a bunch of gibberish, and it looks like a gun, maybe a crazy weird fantasy sci-fi gun. But that's about it. I think I'm kind of petering out. I don't know quite what else to talk about. I think you should just have fun with it. Go crazy. Ignore everything I said. Just try to make something interesting. Remember your functionality and find your creativity.